Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. We have a little bit of a special edition here today based on the hostage situation that occurred in Colleyville, Texas. And we're going to talk about, we have an expert today on hostage negotiation, retired Lieutenant Jack Cambria from the NYPD. When necessary, and we love to have our own on our show. Let me put my headphones on. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. We love to have our own on our show to give their expertise. And today we have one of the best in the world on hostage negotiation. We have retired NYPD Lieutenant Jack Cambria. And with me today, like on most days, is my co-host straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy. I'm excited that we got the guy that wrote the book on hostage negotiation. Basically, we got an expert on hostage negotiation. Absolutely, good to have you, Jack.
Well, folks, we're going to be back in a second after we play our Police Off the Cuff theme song, and we're going to be Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This case started out as this man on the screen, Malik Akram. He went into the synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, and he took 4 people hostages. Allegedly he was armed with a handgun. His name is Malik Faisal Akram, and he was identified by the FBI on Sunday. One of the hostages taken was the temple's rabbi. And the temple apparently is very friendly to people of all faiths and races, and they allow people to come in. They even gave this man tea and offered him shelter. And he supposedly claimed that his sister was this. She was known as Miss Al Qaeda, and her name is Afia Siddiqui. She's a Pakistani national known as Lady Al Qaeda. She was convicted in 2010 by a New York City federal court of attempting to kill U.S. military personnel. She's currently serving an 86-year sentence at Carswell Air Force Base near Fort Worth, Texas, some 15 miles southwest of Colleyville. Now, its initial investigation determines that it is, in fact, not his sister. So we don't know if this is potentially Malik Akram has some mental health issues. But what we're really here today to do is to talk about the hostage negotiation end of this. And Jack Cambria is a retired, I believe, 34-year veteran of the NYPD, Jack?
Correct, Bill, yeah.
And he was the head of the hostage negotiation team for the NYPD. In fact, to this day, he goes all over the country teaching law enforcement personnel about hostage negotiation. And Jack, I would just want to welcome you to the show. I called you just out of the blue, and you answered the call, which was fantastic.
No, I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of the show, so I thank you for inviting me. And it's funny, Bill, you say that I all over the country. Just this Friday, just 2 days ago, I returned Friday evening from Texas. Out in Texas, we're teaching a 5-day advanced class for hostage negotiators. So a couple of the students, they already texted me, what happened the day before? We could have had a field trip, and went over there. So, but yeah, so.
Jack, potentially some of your students could be the ones responding to these major jobs, whether it's with the FBI or a local police department, people that have learned from you. That's how education works, right?
Yeah, we pass on our knowledge. I say I teach the classes that I teach to learn the classes that I teach. So each time I go into a class, something always comes out of it, a gem from another student, another negotiator in the class, and they say, we did this one time. Oh my gosh, I love it. So I kind of steal it. Not so much stealing it, but I take it and I pass it along to other classes, to other students as well. So maybe they can benefit from it as well.
That's perfectly permissible. Phil, you told me that you have a bit of a timeline. Why don't you go into the timeline of what occurred during this, and then we can, Jack, talk about the hostage negotiation end of this.
Yesterday morning in Texas, Colleyville, Texas, about 10:30 a.m., this Malik Faisal Akram entered the synagogue, I believe a temple or a synagogue, and he took 4 people hostage, including the rabbi. He was apparently armed with a handgun. There were reports earlier today that he purchased a handgun on the street. He's only been in the country a couple of weeks. He's a British citizen. Apparently, it was being streamed, I guess, because of COVID on Facebook. People became alarmed. Obviously, law enforcement was notified immediately thereupon. And within a couple hours of negotiation, one of the hostages was released. It sounds like possibly, I don't know this for fact, but there was an exchange possibly of some food, some pizza was brought in. Maybe they negotiated. That's one of the steps that's usually talked about during hostage negotiation. Show us some goodwill. We'll send you some food. You release a hostage. I don't know if that's the case. May have been around 5 p.m. that hostage was released. And then later on in the evening, about 4.5 hours later, there was some kind of a stir inside the location. 3 of the last 3 remaining hostages ran out. When they ran out, the subject ran back in. There was then an interdiction by the law enforcement officers, and a flashbang was heard. Some shots were heard, and apparently the subject was eliminated. We don't know for certain if he was killed by the police or if he self-inflicted a gunshot to himself. But he's DOA. All of the hostages were safely removed, and no one got hurt other than the subject. Now, during the, Billy already stated it, during the negotiation, he was looking for the release of Lady Al-Qaeda, Afia Siddiqui, who was sentenced to 83 years in jail based on terrorism related stuff that took place in Afghanistan. She was an American citizen, educated. She was highly educated, actually. And then after 9/11, she was in fear that her children were going to be forced into Catholicism. So she went back to Afghanistan. She divorced her husband, and she wound up marrying the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was the mastermind of the 9/11 terror attack. She married his nephew. So she was obviously indoctrinated. She became very terror oriented. She wanted to become a terrorist, apparently. And when she was arrested, she was found in possession of a flash drive that contained information on how to do these dirty bombs. Sensitive locations in New York were also on that flash drive. While she was being interrogated, she got a hold of a rifle. She started to shoot at her captors, which were, I believe, American military. And I think she was actually injured during that exchange of gunfire. She was actually close by to the location where the hostages were taken yesterday at a military hospital. And so let's get into the hostage negotiation part of it.
Jack, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and Bill mentioned that, they released one of the hostages early and they brought them some pizza. That obviously was negotiated from the hostage negotiation. You want to talk upon that?
Yeah, so it was probably, we have something known in the hostage world as PPA. PPA stands for Positive Police Actions. So we try to bargain that. We will usually give before getting in return. And by giving before getting in return, what you're doing is building collateral. And by building collateral, at one point, you're going to look to make a withdrawal, like in a bank. Put money into the bank at one point, you may look to make a withdrawal. That's what these PPAs are, positive police actions are. So probably, you hungry? Want some pizzas? So maybe they got him pizza, they got him maybe water, whatever else he might have wanted. And at one point, there had to be a bargain. Look, we'll get you the pizza. This is what we did for you. We're not coming in. We're negotiating with you. We're not sending the SWAT team in. So what are you going to do for us? So probably that's how they might have gotten that one hostage out. I don't know that for a fact. But that's how kind of the process usually works. Now, I think everybody listening would agree that's got to be a very positive sign, letting out a hostage. And the common thinking is if he let one hostage out, maybe he'll let another hostage out. Now, there might have been some, I heard one report on one of the news broadcasts that he might have had the hostage that was released might have some ties to Islam or something to that effect. But again, that falls short of positive knowledge. That was one report that I heard. So maybe that was his motivation also for letting this individual out. Yeah. So I would very much like to hear the interview when that ever should come up, if they allow that to happen, of the hostages, and see what they have to say about all this as well from the inside perspective.
Sure. You know, Jack, besides a political ideology and dealing with hostage takers, this guy very well could have been an EDP, an emotionally disturbed person, and that is one of the most common type of hostage takers that you deal with. You want to talk upon that a bit?
Yeah, probably a majority of incidents that we got involved with in New York City was the EDP. You might be surprised, when I was doing this, we were averaging about 45 assignments per month. And that was of the hostage situations. Those are mostly domestic in nature. Dispute between two parties, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever it might have been. And it escalates to a higher level of now taking hostages. Usually there's alcohol involved, perhaps. That's the first category of response that we would go to. The second one, and that was the most prevalent, were the EDPs. Barricades, withdrawn, barricades. And the barricades were broken down into two categories. First category was the perp, the barricaded perp, the criminal that didn't want to be arrested when the detectives, like you, like Phil, would knock on the door. I'm not coming out. I'm not going back to jail. I'll shoot it out with the police before I come out. Okay, entered the negotiator. We're going to talk to you. Then the second category of barricades was the EDP. And those individuals, usually alone, but now acting out in a manner where they are no longer responsible for themselves. So now the police must become responsible for them. So we're going to talk to you as well. And then the third response type was those of the suicidal jumpers. And if they were still standing when we responded, then we're going to try to rearrange their thinking process from what they wanted to be to what we wanted to be. Now, it should be noted that the average team, because I do teach all over the country, the average response for most of the teams throughout the United States is about 10 assignments per year. In New York City, we were doing 45 a month when I was doing it. So just recently, I was speaking to the new commander of the hostage team. His name is Lieutenant Michael Tomeo. And I said, Mike, how many assignments are you doing now? And he told me 65 assignments per month. And I said, really? I was doing 45. Yeah, he said, post George Floyd now, a lot of when emergency service responds to a scene, they let the negotiators now do their thing, when in the past, they were a little more proactive. So they will go hands-on if they must.
Jack, could I just say something upon that? Cops now are afraid to put their hands on people. So you get one of these EDPs, say, inside Penn Station, and instead of the cops just tackling the guy and bringing him to the ground, they're using the force that we used to use. They'll dance around him for a half hour, 45 minutes. And is that considered I mean, that's ridiculous, but that's what they've made police be, because they're afraid to use force.
Yeah, and they don't get the support that they need anymore. So it seems. So they don't want to, delve in unless they have to, and they will absolutely do so if they must. They'll do their jobs. But you're right. Now it's a little bit more of a process.
Jack,
negotiate.
We have a couple of celebrities in the chat, and we got former Yonkers police commissioner and NYPD chief Eddie Hartnett, and he says no one knows this stuff better than Jack Cambria. So
thank you, Chief. The chief was my CO in emergency service for many years. So in fact, he brought me back to emergency service when I got promoted to sergeant. You have to leave. So I went over to the 72nd precinct as a sergeant, and when he was able to do so, he brought me back as a sergeant to emergency service.
He was my CO in Intel. Chief Arnett was there when I was there as the chief of Intel.
He's helped a lot of people. Yeah, he's helped a lot of people.
Good man.
Chief.
Great boss.
Guys, if I may, I would just like to play a bit of a short video that was from the scene. It's from the special agent in charge from the area covering the hostage situation. Let's see what he has to say here.
Thank you, Chief Miller. Again, my name is Matt DeSarno. I'm the special agent in charge of FBI Dallas, and I'm flanked today by my federal partners from ATF, HSI, DHS headquarters, Texas DPS, and Colleyville Police Department. So today's result, which was 4 safe hostages and the situation resolved, was really a result of a long day of hard work by nearly 200 law enforcement officers from across this region, local officers from across this region. As the chief mentioned, North Richland Hills Trophy Club, Colleyville, obviously, the FBI, ATF, HSI, and Texas DPS, who you see all over this town today. I'd like to highlight a couple things. You know, we used the North Tarrant Regional SWAT team, who started the engagement here in the morning, transitioned to the Dallas FBI SWAT team, and then ultimately to the hostage rescue team and the Dallas FBI SWAT team holding the perimeter. As Chief Miller said, the FBI's hostage rescue team, I consider one of the crown jewels of our organization. Their mission is to conduct deliberate hostage rescues when necessary. In this case, we had a necessity for that, and they were successful. Very proud of them. I'm also extremely proud of the team of negotiators, FBI agents, and local police officers who worked all day long engaging this subject and likely saved the lives of the subjects just through their engagement. It's very likely this situation would have ended very badly early on in the day had we not had professional, consistent negotiation with the subject. I do not have any information right now that indicates that this is part of any kind of ongoing threat. We obviously are investigating. We'll continue to investigate the hostage taker. We'll continue to investigate his contacts. Our investigation will have global reach. We have been in contact already with multiple FBI legats to include Tel Aviv and London. We've been working closely with Secure Community Network and the Jewish Federation, and I want to continue to do that, and we will continue to do that throughout the country. We do believe from our engagement with this subject that he was singularly focused on one issue, and it was not specifically related to the Jewish community, but we're continuing to work to find motive, and we will continue on that path. In terms of the resolution of the incident, the hostage taker is deceased. We will conduct an independent investigation. My evidence response team will be here to process the scene, and a team from Washington will be here to conduct an independent investigation of the shooting incident. And that's the way we handle those things through our normal standard operating procedure. I will warn you before we take questions that you may be frustrated at my inability to answer a whole lot of questions right now because of the ongoing investigation and the shooting incident that occurred. And I specifically will not answer specific questions about the subject. There's a lot of information out there already about the subject, and we really don't want to jeopardize any potential investigation or any investigative leads into his motives or his potential associates.
So the FBI isn't going to answer many questions, but the big thing I want to play that for is just the whole coordination there of the local, equivalent of emergency service SWAT team, the FBI SWAT team, the ATF. All those guys were there. They're all congratulating each other now, as they should. They all did a great job. But Jack, one of the things is that you got to figure out early on. I mean, look, you're going to talk to this guy for 10, 11 hours. So you have to have hostage negotiators that are ready to step in when one guy gets fatigued or one guy hits a wall. Or what if the hostage taker gets agitated and doesn't want to speak to that specific hostage negotiator anymore?
Well, you're right, Bill. It is a team concept. It's the hostage negotiation team. Just as a sidebar, the word hostage negotiation team is the only unit in the entire NYPD that uses the word team in it. There's units, there's squads, there's bureaus, but it's only only a unit that uses the word team in its name. So it's a 5-person team very quickly. So there's the team leader. That would have been my job when I was working. Then there's a primary negotiator. Only the primary negotiator speaks. There's a coach who communicates with the primary negotiator by writing little notes and handing them off to the primary negotiator, who has complete discretion as to whether or not he or she will use that. Then there's the scribe. The scribe will make a chronological listing of events, significant events as they're going on, because you might want to refer back to something later on. And then probably one of the most critical team members is the intelligence officer, also known as the float, because they float around and they get information. Now, these are the detectives that tell us why we are here today. Oftentimes entering into a negotiation. It's kind of like entering into the middle of a movie. If you've ever done that, you want to take the family to the movie, you're running a few minutes late, get in the car, you get some traffic, you get to the theater, you can't find a parking spot. Long and short of it, you get into the theater 20 minutes into the movie. And when you get into the movie, there's Superman lying on the ground. Oh my gosh, how did Superman get on the ground? Well, you don't know because you got there late. So you have to start backtracking and figuring it out. Same thing when negotiators get on the scene. So you get to the scene, the incident commander hands you this bomb where the fuse is already lit, and they say, defuse this before it explodes. And you know what? Mostly we do. So the intelligence officer finds out the information by interviewing family, friends, neighbors, working with the detective squads. Hey, can you run this name for me? And maybe checking camera surveillance, interviewing first responding officers, and kind of puts it together for us. So the negotiator now has, or the team can start a strategy of how to best deal with this individual. And that strategy is ever changing. You know, it might start out one way, but then you're getting new information and you might have to shift that strategy. So I would suggest that no two negotiations are ever exactly the same. Each is tailor-made specifically for that individual because no two problems are exactly the same. So we start out with the basics, active listening, trying to understand, the reason we are here. And before you can look to solve a problem, you have to first identify that problem. And then you can start developing that strategy.
Folks, this is retired NYPD Lieutenant Jack Cambria, probably the most experienced hostage negotiator in the nation. And he currently goes about the United States and the world teaching hostage negotiation. So what better man to come on this show after the Colleyville incident in Texas yesterday than Jack Cambria? I was lucky that he listens to his voicemails and he picks up his phone because here he is. And I can't be more thrilled to have caught him. I actually went to a second string guy named James Shanahan, who's a good buddy. He's a good buddy of mine. He didn't like to be called the second stringer though, but he has a great sense of humor.
I got my best stuff from James Shanahan. He's one of my mentors as well. If you're watching, James, hello.
He's fantastic. But anyway, there's so many questions with this is because the other part of who you are, which is very important in situations like this, is that you're a former emergency serviceman. And for folks outside of New York City, that's called SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics. That's California. And in New York City, we call it emergency service. And they even have a saying in New York City, when the public needs help, I hate this thing, but I have to say it because when the public needs help, they call the police. When the police needs help, and now you're going to hear dun 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 dun, they call emergency service.
They do.
They should have that on their trucks. It should be that little saying. But they love, every emergency service cop loves that saying.
Oh yeah.
When the public needs help, they call the police. When the police needs help, they call ESU. Right.
And the reason they call it service is because it's true. You'll go from one assignment going through a door in a high risk warrant situation, the guns, the machine guns, the helmets, the vest, the battering rams, to the very next job, taking a cat out of a tree. So it's very diversified. So emergency service is on patrol, but not 911 patrol. It's patrol responding to requests for service from police officers. I can't even begin to tell you over my years how many times I've climbed down sewers for police officers to retrieve evidence, or climb the tree for a cat, to pick out the cats out of the tree. Also, it's a rescue unit. So if somebody sees fit to, say, jump off that broken bridge, is on the girder, still standing, it's the emergency service unit that is tasked with climbing up the girder and trying to rescue that individual from him or herself. So it's a very diversified unit. So that's why we call it emergency service as opposed to SWAT.
Right, exactly. Savage Media, thank you for the $5 super chat. Folks, if you're not subscribed to Police Off the Cuff, please go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. We have a Patreon with 3 different levels, the bucket, polish my rack, and dipped in butter. If you want to contribute to us, help us keep this show going, you can pay a fee monthly. We also have a YouTube memberships designated by the folks that are in the chat with the green font, and we have 6 levels to that. $2.99 a month, you get a bucket. $6.99 a month, you can have coffee with Cannon. $9.99 a month, you could polish my rack. $24.99 a month, you dipped in butter. And the premier one, which the premier guy, the only guy we had at that level, dropped out. $49.99 a month, you could be heated dipped in butter. So, folks, if you want to contribute to us, that's how you can do it. Today we have retired NYPD hostage, I should say guru, Lieutenant Jack Cambria, who is known all over the country and all over the world as probably the best hostage negotiator, not just negotiator, but teacher of hostage negotiation. It's our thrill today to have Jack Cambria. Phil, you got anything?
Yeah, I was going to ask Jack. I was watching you on Fox yesterday as this whole thing was unfolding, and you were very careful. And I think this was very smart because with the technology today, you could carry a cell phone, you could pick up live TV, you could pick up cable. There's all types of things. This incident was actually being streamed over Facebook. So you were careful about not to say certain things about what would take place in a hostage negotiation type incident. I mean, obviously, we want everybody out of there alive. The one question I had about the whole situation, now, obviously, you're going to be able to comment on what we would do in New York. At what point would the decision be made to have a tactical engagement? Now, it looked like things kind of, it looked like the hostages were able to escape, and then there was the engagement. And obviously, we don't know for sure whether he shot himself or he was shot by the police. But is there a point? Obviously, hostage negotiation in New York would be in control of what's going on with the negotiation and stuff. But who makes the decision is really the question. At what point, obviously, things could be getting out of hand. Do you guys make the decision it's time for a tactical engagement, or is that made by ESU?
So, Phil, how it works, the incident commander, for those of you out listening, you might not know what the incident commander is. In New York City, at least, the incident commander is the highest ranking member from Patrol Services Bureau that's physically on the scene and will be directing operations. So often it would be the incident commander that's going to make that call based on input from the emergency service commander who's on the scene, from the hostage commander who's on the scene, and then based on their own years of many years of experience and their observations, they will make an informed decision of how this should turn out. But in reality, the true incident commander is not that highest ranking member on the scene, but rather the true incident commander is the person on the other side of that door. So the hostage taker, the subject, the barricaded subject. Their behavior will dictate how this job will play out. So for example, if they're negotiating, not hurting anybody, probably negotiators are going to continue doing what they do, negotiate. But once that dynamic changes, they change that dynamic. They start hurting people, killing people. Then there's no longer negotiations to be had, and the tactical team will go in. They'll be directed to go in. But ultimately, it would be the incident commander, and that's the patrol guide, our book of rules and procedures, the wording in that the highest ranking member from patrol. The reason they fix it at from Patrol Services Bureau is because it's usually in the patrol precinct, always in the patrol precinct. So it's usually the commander of that precinct, if he or she is working, or if not, then we have the duty captain, of course, or duty inspector, or duty chief, whoever might be working, and depending on how high that incident might be, this is how it kind of works.
Well, Jack, in a multi-tiered situation like this, where you got federal units on the scene, you got ATF, FBI, and then you got the local police. I mean, the local police in Colleyville, Texas, is not the NYPD. I mean, I would imagine NYPD would probably get in a sword fight with the FBI over who was in charge of this. And I'm sure that happens.
Well, that's an interesting point, though. Normally, the FBI would not be involved with a hostage situation in a local jurisdiction.
Right.
But the reason they got involved with this, because I guess the word terrorist was mentioned, or it was some kind of connection to Islam, or this woman who's in jail for 86 years. So that's when they would come and take over the incident. You may all remember the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida, about 6 years ago.
Yes.
So I was part of the National Police Foundation's national review on that. We went down to Orlando. We interviewed all the parties concerned, all the first responders, some of the victims, hospital staff, the medical examiner. And there's a rather extensive report out. Anybody can access it. It's on. You just have to go to the National Police Foundation's website. You can Google that. And then there's a drop-down menu where it says publications, and you can find that particular publication. And with that, because the word terrorist was mentioned, this guy Omar Martin, just to refresh everybody's memory real quick, entered into the nightclub. He killed 49 people. He shot and seriously wounded 52 others. And then he retreated into a bathroom where there was still hostages, live hostages. I think there was 11 hostages, as I recall. And at this point, the police had to look to slow it down. And it was the Orlando Police Department hostage negotiators that did the job. In fact, we interviewed the negotiators, the main negotiator, primary negotiator, as well. His name was Sergeant Andy Brennan. And he was negotiating for a while. And the negotiations were basically, Martin was just demanding that the U.S. stop their airstrikes on Iraq, Afghanistan, and that was the gist of it. But while he was talking, what he was not doing was shooting. So at this point, the police really have to kind of pump those brakes a little bit, slow it down, because they can't go in. If they go in, they're going to be facing in the direction of those hostages and also Martin. And probably more likely than not, a shootout will ensue. And they'll take him out. In fact, one of the police officers at the end, when he did come out, there was a shootout. One of the police officers got shot right in the helmet, right here. The helmet saved his life.
Wow.
But if they would have gotten involved with a shootout, those police bullets have gone after they hit him in the direction of those hostages. So national training dictates that when there are hostages and they're not being hurt at this moment and being held hostage by a hostage taker, that the police will not go in because it can result in a friendly fire situation. So I'm very interested to once the FBI is able to release all the details of what happened, I'm very interested in learning about this and maybe dissecting it a little bit so I can bring it to the class.
You know, Jack, there's someone in the chat, and I can't verify this whether it's true or not, but it sounds reasonable. His name is John Arenz. He says, "I'm a retired Colleyville cop. What happened was Rabbi Charlie had training in what to do in hostage situations. Rabbi Charlie saw an opportunity and got all the hostages out, including himself, and that's when the team moved in." I mean, that sounds reasonable. It sounds possible. We don't know if, in fact, that occurred, but the FBI probably won't tell what actually happened until, probably about 10 years from now,
There was someone earlier on the news and said that back in August that rabbi did get terrorism training on hostage negotiation and stuff like that. They did go through some drills. So the person, I forgot the name of the company, but the person was on the news saying we were the ones that actually did the training. So yeah, it sounds plausible to me that, and I did see video of them running out. So they saw an opportunity. And I guess at that point, once the hostages are out, it's obvious that the tactical team is going to move in. And I don't think there's anybody saying, wait, let's get word from the chief on the scene. It just kind of happens, right, Jack?
Yeah. And when usually hostage takers realize that by keeping hostages alive, it's serving as kind of an insurance policy that the police will not come in.
Right.
So once there's no longer any hostages, then there's nothing really preventing the police from going in. First off, to make the apprehension. And then if they went in and if they were challenged, of course, the police will do what they need to do. But again, it's still undetermined as to whether the police killed him or he did shoot himself. That was not in time. So I think, and I agree with you, probably 10 years from now, because that's how it was with the Pulse nightclub before they came out with any information that we can use.
Did they negotiate him out of the bathroom at the Pulse?
No. So what happened, one of the hostages that were inside the bathroom with him sent a text message to a relative saying that he told them he's got 4 bomb vests. In reality, he had no bomb vest whatsoever. But he told the hostages he's got 4 bomb vests. He's going to put a bomb vest on 4 of those hostages and send them out into the nightclub and then detonate them. So when that came to light, then the police started to ramp up their actions and they became more proactive. Where they made with their Bearcat, they had the ram on their Bearcat. They rammed holes through the bathroom door at the same time, simultaneously deployed concussion grenades, stun devices. And at that point, he came running out. He had 2 weapons. He had a AK-47 type rifle, and he had a Glock 19. And he came out like the old cowboy westerns, shooting both guns at the same time, and he lost that battle. And that's when the SWAT officer from Orlando took the hit right at the helmet.
Wow.
And we interviewed him as well. We had all the first responders with that. So that's how that wound up ending up. And mostly, from whatever research I've done, hostage take is from a terrorist perspective. We're going there as a terrorist with a mission, an ideology. They pretty much know they're not coming out alive. They kind of know that, you know. So they want to go out as those martyrs, you know, and all that goes along with that.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, Jack, Scott Wagner, one of your hostage negotiators, thank you for the $9.99 super chat, Scott. And he wanted to say hello, and he's proud that he's a NYPD hostage negotiator, and he was trained by you.
As he should be, and Scott was a brilliant negotiator. And Scott actually, we came in the same class together, but I was given kind of a guest seat when I was in the Mercy Service. And from the former commander, a man by the name of Hugh McGowan, for those of you who might remember you was a big mentor to me. But Scott and I were in the same class, but Scott was in the hostage team at that point, but I was in the Mercy Service. So Scott, when I first took over the team, Scott was very nice with me. He came over and kind of showed me around a little bit and the way it works. So hello to you, Scott. Good.
You know, Jack, I just wanted to mention something too that people may not think of. First of all, one of the things that emergency service does is when a hostage situation is in a particular building, they'll have the schematic of that building. So they know where every single person is. They may even have those cameras that go under the door that can take pictures of the positioning where everyone is. Some police departments have robots, and they can send the robot in because, you know, if a robot gets damaged, it's just money. And if a human gets damaged, it's, you know, it can be killed. But there's been some pushback. The public doesn't like the police to use robots. They would rather cops get killed than robots get damaged.
Yeah.
You know, so some of these things, though, part of a great hostage negotiation, there has to also be a tactical element and also an investigative element. Because maybe it could have helped a little bit if the hostage negotiators yesterday could have found out who his family was and maybe bring his family to the scene. That can help. And I'm not saying it was possible. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking, but I'm sure you've done that in the past yourself.
Sure, and we have all those toys, I like to call them. In fact, you may remember, probably maybe about a year ago, we were experimenting with something called DigiDog. It's a robot that looks like a dog. It walks on the four legs. You know, it's got the cameras, it's got the speakers, it's got the microphones. And one of our councilwomen out of Queens thought it was too offensive to some certain communities, and she lobbied against it. And then Mayor de Blasio, he went along with, and he canceled the contract on that. But it was such a great investigative tool, especially for negotiators, where they can bring this dog robot right up to the door and negotiate from there, where police officers would be safe and would have to negotiate from the other side of that door, emergency service as well. So, but we have all those investigative techniques. And what we do also, though, usually when you spoke about schematics, a little kind of quick impromptu blueprints of what that apartment might look like, that's usually obtained from our intelligence officer on the hostage team, who I spoke about a little bit earlier. So that'll be their position, because emergency service can't do that. They got the bunkers, they got the machine guns in their hand. They can't be going around knocking on doors and getting schematics.
Right.
That's one of the services that we also perform for emergency service. And when time permits, like yesterday would have been a great example for that, we'll go on a lot of these real estate websites, such as Realtor.com, Zillow, Redfin is another one, and there are many. And if that property has ever been on sale anyplace, those pictures, diagrams even, and pictures of the actual rooms will be online. And we'll print those out and we'll give those to emergency service.
You know, Jack, I just know from hitting warrants inside housing projects, it was a great help to know where the people were. And then also if they said there's two pit bulls in the rear room on the right, you wanted to know that, you know, because pit bulls, they love sergeants. Sergeants taste better than almost any other cop on the police department. So I didn't want to put any salt and pepper on my leg before I get in there. You know, I wanted to know where the pit bulls were.
We once had a hostage situation going on in Brooklyn, in the 6th Street precinct. It was on Avenue N, around Utica Avenue. And it went on for a while. And when these two individuals go in to rob the place, middle of the afternoon, they fire a shot into the ceiling to get everybody's attention. And there was a pit bull. And when the pit bull heard the gun go off, I'll never forget, Daisy the pit bull was her name. She goes running into the basement. We didn't see Daisy until the thing was all over. So much for the reputation of something.
And you know, Jack, pit bulls hate flashbangs too. And now on the NYPD, you can't use a flashbang unless the chief of department gives you permission.
Yeah, there was that was when during the time that I was there. There was an incident. I can't even remember her name.
Alberta Spruill, that changed the entire way the NYPD uses flashbangs.
Yeah, exactly.
Ridiculous.
For those of you who might not remember, and you can probably tell the story better than me, Bill, because it was in Manhattan North. I think it was a 2-8 precinct, as I recall.
No, 2-5. It was a 2-5.
Thank you, 2-5. And the emergency service was given bad intelligence from an informant to the detective. And finally, they hit the wrong door, and it was Alberta Spruill's apartment, who had a pacemaker, when they introduced a flash grenade, because they had very bad intelligence about that room, that the right apartment that they were supposed to go. These guys had heavy weapons and all that, so they introduced a flash grenade. Again, wrong apartment, and Alberta Spruill had his heart condition and a pacemaker, had a heart attack and died.
Yeah, no, I reinvestigated that with Manhattan North Homicide Squad, and the confidential informant couldn't decide which door it was. He was doing one of these, you know. He had no idea, and it was, that I don't want to get into it.
That's
but
why
really,
that recon is so important, man. That recon is very, very important. God forbid you hit the wrong door.
Phil, you're right. I used to put a Dunkin' Donuts sticker on the door when they said it, because they're not going to notice it. I'll put it at the very bottom of the door, and then when they come back, there's the door with the Dunkin' Donuts sticker, because it is so easy to hit the wrong door. It really is. Every apartment door looks the same.
Any housing project, all the doors look alike, and you get off on the wrong floor. And what we would do is, if we had informants when we were in Intel, we would actually have one of the officers on the team, whether it be myself or one of my partners, go with the informant, make sure he points out the right door, and then we would mark it. Like you said, Billy, we would either take a piece of paper and stick it in a corner, or a magic marker or something, and know 100% that we're going to hit the right door, because God forbid that happens. How would you feel? I mean, that's a really awful incident, and it changed the way tactics are deployed throughout the whole police department, basically. So
100%. Phil, I just want you to do a quick read for this, and then we'll get right back.
Just a second, I gotta find it. Joe Murray. All right, I'm gonna have to wing it. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in the New York area and need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only a great trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He really knows both sides of the fence. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com. And that's all I got.
That's all right. Joe's a friend of the show. He's a great attorney, and we recommend him. If police off the cuff recommends him, you can count on us.
I recommend him as well. I know Joe.
He's a great guy. So, Jack, the other part was the investigative component to this. We may find out that this guy who did this is just an EDP, is an emotionally disturbed person, and has absolutely zero ties to Al Qaeda, zero ties to being a terrorist, and zero ties to Lady Al Qaeda. But you don't know that, and investigation takes time, and the FBI is great at giving no information. I don't totally agree with that. Early on in the investigation, I think that's exactly the way to go. But, when you ask them 6 months from now and they're still not answering you, then it gets a little ridiculous.
So, Phil, earlier you mentioned, when I was speaking on Fox 5, again this morning, they reached out to me again. But last night, one of the commentators said to me, he was a little strong when he was coming back at me, the police is not giving any information. What's your take on that? And the answer was so simple. The take was that they don't want to give out information because they have to control the media.
Of course.
Because he's watching. Probably have multiple screens on, in the synagogue, probably watching all these different news networks and listening. And then you have these so-called subject matter experts coming on, offering their advice, what they would do. Oh, really? So he's listening, and he's gathering intelligence. So that was the reason. And that's why I myself was a little cautious. You were right about that. I was very cautious about information I would give out. Not that I had any inside information. I do not. But what might we do in New York City? Okay. That's good to know.
Right.
So that's the reason for that. And on the other side of that, at least a dozen times over my many years of doing this work, 14 years with the hostage team as the commander, probably a dozen times over those 14 years, we used the media as a negotiation tool. So they want to tell their story to the media. Okay, well, if I can arrange that, what are you going to do for me? And if I can get some hostages out, in fact, we did it several times, and we got a reporter who was kind of police friendly over the years when reporting about the police, and we'd get him or her to the scene. And in fact, we used Dean Meminger one time from New York One. He's always positive about the police. We got him to the scene. It was in the Bronx, and got him into our NOC. Our NOC is our Negotiation Operations Center. It's a truck, and no cameras, no recording devices, just a pad, pen. We'd coach him. He would ask him questions, and then when it's over and the individual comes out, he gets the exclusive. We care about that. We don't care about that. Good, you helped us out. Get the exclusive. Good for you. But we also used him as a negotiation tool, to help us with that endeavor. So it goes both ways, but it's critical to control the information that gets to the media.
You don't know if he's working with someone else. They could be watching and then calling his cell phone and giving him the information. So obviously, the least amount of information that's released to the public, especially when it's ongoing, the better. Of course, it's common sense.
Yeah, there you go. So that's it. So, I like to say, so the NYPD has some bragging rights as it relates to hostage negotiations. The NYPD established the very first hostage negotiation team in the entire world. It all started in the NYPD back in 1973. And because of that, because we've been doing it longer than everybody else, I like to say we probably got it wrong more than everybody else because we've been doing it longer than everybody else. But by getting it wrong more than everybody else, we probably now get it right more than anybody else because we learn from our past mistakes. So we just get stronger each time.
Jack, would you consider the fact that they had to well, we don't know. The hostage taker could have killed himself, but if they had to shoot him, is that a negative thing for, obviously they have to do what they have to do if they go in there and he's using deadly physical force against them, but should other means have been used that maybe they didn't have to go in there? Because if in fact the hostages got out before the SWAT team got in, is that considered in hostage negotiation as a negative outcome?
Again, because we don't know what happened, the facts there, but normally how it would work, once the hostages are out, well, we still have someone there inside a barricade now, and we're going to negotiate with him as well. We do not, as the police, want to enter into a hostile environment. But we know what happens every time we go into a hostile environment in a warrant application or a tactical application. There's a 50-50 chance at best of coming out safely, and nobody likes 50-50 odds. So we're going to continue the negotiation process. Time is on our side at this point. The hostage is out. We can relax a little bit. If he kills himself, well, so be it. It's not a result we want. But the objective of not only hostage negotiators but all police officers is the preservation of life, all life. So the life of the hostages, the life of the hostage taker, and the life of the police. I think one of the most important things that I did as a negotiator, my whole team, Scott, who's listening now, one of the most critical things we did was keep emergency service officers safe. Because if we were successful in our negotiation strategy and enabled that individual to come out to us, well, what did that mean? They don't have to go into that hostile environment. So they might not see it that way, but I can tell you their wives or husbands sitting at home waiting for them to come home, they see it that way. So that was one of the most critical things I think we did, is keep police officers safe.
All they have to do is ask that cop from the Pulse nightclub that has the dent in his helmet. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, really. It's no fun to get shot in the head, even if you got a helmet on that prevents you from dying, right? It's
guy's one very lucky police officer.
He really is. He had a welt on his head this big.
Wow. Scott Wagner says we always have a debrief as soon as the job is over, no matter how long the job is.
Yes, thank you, Scott.
Jack, that's a good idea, Jack, not just in hostage negotiation, but in major investigations. I used to like to do that in homicide investigations because a lot of times, even in successful homicide investigations, I would think about, and maybe I didn't verbalize it, I would think about all the mistakes we made. Yeah. But you're going to make mistakes no matter what. We're not perfect because you can't predict everything. It's a fluid situation. But I used to always think about maybe if we went over it and talked about why did we make this mistake? We won't make it in the future.
No, I think it's critical that you do that because we learn from our mistakes, and we don't want to be victims of going back to that same mistake. And also on the other side of it, revisiting what has been successful for you. If we like that, we should revisit that and keep that as part of our maybe protocols. Maybe we shouldn't do that again on the other side of it because that didn't work. So yeah, I think you learn from your mistakes. We should at least.
Absolutely. I don't know how to pronounce his exact name. Dom Tuyo PSO, Gentleman Jack Cambria, one of the kindest, humble, competent police commanders you will ever meet. So Jack, you got some fans in this chat here, which is.
I'm not sure exactly who it is because the last name's not there. But thank you, Dom. I appreciate you.
It's very kind.
He generally is Gentleman Jack. That name fits. That's for sure.
That's right.
So I got to cannot begin to tell you how many bottles of the Gentleman Jack whiskey I used to get for Christmas from my friends and negotiators over the years. So.
You'll never hear anyone say Gentleman Bill. You'll never hear that said anywhere in the police department. But that's we can all be like
Bill, they might say
bitching with Bill. Yeah, exactly. They might say that. Jack, part of the investigation too, like I always used to think about this also in homicide investigation is like once you make the arrest or once it's over, people don't realize the investigation is not over. It's still, you have so much more work to do. And in this hostage situation, they have a ton of work to do, mostly on the background of the individual that took the hostages. They want to find out every single possible thing they can know about him. They want to find out, like Phil did earlier, the timeline. When exactly did he come in? How long has he been going to that temple? Apparently, he's been there before. They know the guy. Who does he know? Who is he friendly with? They need to talk to his family. I don't know if he has a job. If he does have a job, interview his fellow employees. So the investigation is not over once the whole situation is over.
Sure. Martin over at the Pulse nightclub, he surveilled that place. Matter of fact, an hour before he did the shooting, he was in there on video, going in. He paid his ticket. He had one of those wristbands they put on you. He stood for, I think it was 13 minutes. Just again, he was looking around, surveilling. The officer that had the extra duty, that's now jargon, it's the off-duty work that we do, who's assigned to the post, he said he recognized him. He's seen him before on prior occasions. So he's been there before. So it kind of plays into what you're saying here with this guy, that he's been there before.
Sort of like recon. They were reconning the location. I heard a story that the rabbi that was being held as hostage had actually given him tea. Apparently he was homeless or something, this guy that took the hostages, and he had offered him tea or something like that. And then when he came in ranting, I guess he pulled a gun, and we had the situation yesterday. So yeah, he was known to them apparently.
So the tea was a previous film? Do you know?
Yes, previously he had. Apparently, when he came to, they were saying he was an English citizen, but apparently one of the listeners said he's not. But wherever he was, he apparently spent some time in a homeless shelter close by to the synagogue, and I guess they must have either they reached out to the local homeless shelter, or maybe he was directed towards them, and they gave him, I guess they gave him a meal, they gave him some tea, was one of the stories. Again, these are all unconfirmed stories, but it appears he was known to the people at the synagogue, specifically the rabbi, before the incident unfolded yesterday.
Yeah, apparently he was ranting about that he had nothing against Jews, that they took care of him, they gave him tea, and
right.
So it wasn't, again, like an anti-Semitic type thing. Yeah. This appears to be more like an EDP thing. That
now there's something. Maybe a lot of you heard of the term Stockholm Syndrome. The Stockholm Syndrome is when the captors develop admiration towards the captive, towards the hostage taker. And it's a psychological phenomenon where they feel that they are depending on this individual for their mere survival. In fact, they come to a point where they trust the hostage taker more than they do the police. They're concerned if the police come in, they're going to shoot at, they may be killed. So they're depending on this individual for their mere survival. And it usually develops over time. It's not something you're going to see in a short-term negotiation, but in the hours, as of yesterday, when it starts getting to the 10, 11, 12 hours, then that's when it starts to develop. There's something also known as the Lima syndrome. So the Stockholm Syndrome was first discovered in Stockholm, Sweden, thus the name. The Lima syndrome, which was discovered in Lima, Peru, where these individuals went into the Japanese ambassador's home. They're having a big party to take it over. A big, it was going to be a big hostage thing. And over a period of time, the captors started developing admiration for the hostages. So it's kind of the reverse Stockholm Syndrome, if you're following me. And as a result, they let the hostages go on their own. The police were there. They started letting them go. They surrendered and all that. So I don't know if that was starting to develop here. It sounds like a little bit on the reverse side that he was developing admiration towards the hostages yesterday. Maybe that's why he let this one individual go, or he appreciated maybe at one point that he got the tea in the past, maybe that he got pizza yesterday from the police. So again, but we don't know. Maybe he was at EDP, or he wanted his 15 minutes of fame.
It does sound like there was some level of comfortableness between the hostages and the hostage taker that they were able to get into an area to escape. So there must have been, it wasn't like he was holding them at gunpoint, or else, he may have started shooting, So there must have been, maybe the rabbi himself was trying to use some negotiation tactics himself. Listen, you have a family or whatever. Who knows what was being said? But it does sound like there was a level of trust that they got that opportunity to escape. So I agree with you on that, Jack. I think there was maybe that Lima syndrome was taken.
The reverse. Yeah, it was kicking in a little bit with him. So we don't know.
Yeah. Jack, someone had asked in the chat about using a kind of a gas or something to put people to sleep. But I remember years ago, there was hundreds of hostages taken by Chechen rebels in a theater.
Yeah.
And it was going on for days and weeks, and it was just brutal. And someone came up with some kind of idea to use some kind of drug, but if you didn't administer the antidote in a very timely thing, people would just suffocate to death. And that's what happened. Hundreds of people died because they couldn't administer the antidote quickly enough to the hostages.
Yeah, and the other issue with that, so 850 theater goers, the Moscow theater, as you said, 50 Chechenian terrorists, including women, all strapped with bomb vests, entered into the theater. They wanted Chechenians who were in Russian jails to all be released. That was their purpose for doing that. And after it was a 3-day event, and on that third day, the Russian special forces decided that they're going to introduce that gas, which was a fentanyl. We all know about fentanyl, right? Mixed it with heroin. Fentanyl is a drug that's used as an anesthetic when you're going into surgery. So it's a controlled substance. So they introduced it into the air conditioning vents. And as a result of that, 179 people were killed. And a lot of those were young children, because they didn't consider body weight when you administer an anesthetic, an anesthetic drug. And a lot of them were killed with that. Also, as you said, there was a very poor triage where some were getting that antidote, some were not. They didn't have enough ambulances. They were just throwing people on buses to get them to the hospital, just throwing them on the ground. And they were vomiting and choking on their own vomit. So there's a lot of problems with that. But we learned from that as well that we can't introduce gas. And if you introduce gas and a hostage got, say, COPD, a breathing problem, you're going to kill them. You're going to kill them.
Yeah.
You're going to kill them. We're going to kill the hostage, right? So it's not a recommended approach. I mean, never say never. Never say never. But the NYPD hasn't used it in years now. Probably even before I went into emergency service, they stopped using it because there was some tragedies with that as well. People dying as a result of police actions. But it's still in the arsenal. So again, never say never if the circumstance should present itself.
Amazing.
Now,
So is there anything that is new, any new techniques in the hostage negotiation field, or is it still an old field that uses psychological means to talk to people? I mean, I know you said that you should never lie to a hostage taker.
if you're going to lie, don't lie stupidly. Don't lie so they can with information that's available, and how people will check you out with this.
Right.
You have the world at your fingertips on your cell phone these days with internet access. So if you're going to lie, don't lie stupidly where people can immediately access and check you out on what you gave. So, a real quick example, I want to say 2003, we had an individual in the 113 precinct in Jamaica, Queens, was holding his 4-month-old baby hostage, and he had just shot and killed the grandmother. She wasn't dead when she was removed from the scene. She was able to get out of the house. He shot 3 people, actually. They were able to stumble out of the house. The neighbors called the police. They were taken off to the hospital. So after a period of time, while we're negotiating with him now, and he had other hostages in the house as well, besides his 4-month-old baby, he asked, "What happened to the people I shot?" And we had known that the grandmother had expired. But we didn't want to tell him that. We were trying to make a weak case into a strong case. It's not so bad yet. Nobody was killed.
Right.
That was the strategy we were trying to use. But we knew he did not have access to that lie. So we had already detectives at the hospital. So he wasn't able to access that information by calling the hospital. "Hey, what happened to that woman?" He's not going to tell her that she died. So that was a lie that was, I guess, somewhat safe to tell. But we try not to lie. We're trained not to lie. Because the problem with lying, of course, is you never know what information the other party has available. And here you come along trying to sell a bill of goods when the fact is they know better.
That could blow the whole thing up.
Yeah. What happened, Phil, do you think, if you got caught in a lie, say after 5 hours of intensive negotiations, now you're caught in a lie?
Right.
Gone. You lose all credibility. And that's start with another negotiator, probably. And that's if they want to talk to the police at all. People love to paint with a broad brush when it comes to the police, use the plural sense. You cops are all liars. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Not the one cop that lied, but now you cops. So it causes us some great problems when we do that. So we try not to do that.
Absolutely.
This incident also got national and international coverage because of the fact that it was at a synagogue, the fact that the word terrorism was used. I believe President Biden said that this is an act of terrorism. I don't know if in fact it is, but he used that word terrorism.
Yeah.
So it got all kinds of attention.
Israel on it? Yeah, sure.
The Prime Minister of Israel was monitoring it. Actually, he tweeted out that he was watching it very closely and hoping for the safety of the hostages and all that. So, yeah,
sure.
Definitely an international incident.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you're not going to see, the president commenting on something that happened in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, right? There's a hostage situation, domestic or something like that. But because you're right, it was a synagogue, it takes on that special connotation attached to it. The fact that the word terrorism was mentioned, so now it opened up to the whole world. So.
Yeah, it actually put a lot of the throughout the United States, a lot of the religious locations on alert. I believe they said at one point that he called a rabbi in New York and said that there were bombs at the location. So that obviously put everybody in New York on high alert, all the religious locations. So, and I guess it spread throughout the country, which is obviously a good tactic to take when you don't know what you're dealing with. It was a fluid situation, and they were talking about initially that it was the brother of Afia Siddiqui. It turned out he wasn't related to her. He just had this religious cause, and he was doing what he was doing. But at the time, I guess when things are fluid and you don't know for sure, you got to err on the side of caution.
Yeah. This guy Martin did the same thing at the Post nightclub. Negotiating with him, he told the sergeant that he's got bombs planted in vehicles around the building, and he's going to detonate them. So now that's another added thing that the police have to deal with and try to figure this stuff out, So there was not, there wasn't any bombs. Same thing here. He put that out there, but it's just to, I think, keep the police off kilter and kind of, keep them scrambling a little bit.
Jack, as being a teacher of hostage negotiation as well as a student, do you study hostage situations on an international level so you can learn things from those instances that you might not have seen yourself?
I do. In fact, I'm anxious to see if I have some contacts. I can try to get some information about this job when it becomes available. But to use it as a teaching tool to negotiators. So we learn through example and by case studies, case reviews of lessons learned and things we mentioned a little earlier, things that we didn't like, things that we liked, and what worked for the police. So we can replicate those, in the future. So, but I do. If I see something going on across the country, across internationally as well, study it. So, I research it, internet access.
Sure, absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Our guest tonight is retired NYPD Lieutenant Jack Cambria. one of the most experienced hostage negotiators probably in the world. He teaches all over the United States. He still studies hostage negotiation so he can keep his game up there, because you never know, could be a young upstart, a cocky guy from another police department trying to knock Jack off his perch. We don't want that to happen, right? So he's staying with it, and we're so thrilled that he came on the show today. And with no notice, I called him, and he said, "Sure, I could come on at 5:00." Phil, you got any last words?
Yeah, last words. Obviously, as a police officer, we take an oath to protect life and property. And I know that Jack, going into any hostage negotiation, his goal, his mission is not only for the hostages, the hostage taker as well. They don't want any loss of life. Jack, I want to point out one thing you said early on, that when you go to your training seminars, that if somebody gives you a piece of information, you're not shutting down. You're the big shot hostage negotiator. No, you're going to take any information. You called it a gem, and I think that shows where you get the name Gentleman Jack from. There's never you learn something new every day, as they say. And in all the situations that go on throughout the country, if we could learn a little tidbit here and a little tidbit there and put it to good use, I think that that shows your professionalism, Jack. Thank you for coming on today. And I think we're going to learn something from this particular case as we would in any other case.
For sure, indeed. And just to close that out, just to play on your point, Phil, I don't believe there's any true experts in any field, because true experts assume that you have all the answers. And I don't have all the answers. I probably know what all the questions are. I've heard them all over the years. But again, each negotiation is tailor-made for that individual, because no two problems are ever exactly alike. So, but I do appreciate you saying that, and both of you, thank you for having me.
Folks, thank you so much for listening in. This is Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. On behalf of myself, Bill Cannon, Phil Grimaldi, and retired NYPD Lieutenant Jack Cambria, have a great night and stay safe.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.